Hello everyone, my name is Akal and I'm a somatic therapist. If you'd like to find out about the work I do, you can check out my website, which I have down below this video. Also down below the video is another website where you can get your natal chart, which is vaultoftheheavens.com. And you want to look for your sun, your moon, and your ascendant. Those are probably, in my opinion, the three most relevant placements when looking at nakshatras. So today is actually another redo video. During this whole series of videos that I'm doing on the nakshatras, I'm realizing, my knowledge and understanding of the content has grown so much. Really a wonderful learning experience by making these videos. The first video that I had to redo was Ashwini, so I'm going to redo Bharani, which is the second nakshatra. So Ashwini and Bharani are really interesting because they're contrasts. I don't know, they kind of epitomize the sort of Shiva Shakti contrast. What I mean by that is the sort of masculine principle, or the Shiva principle, or the Shakti principle, which is the feminine. And I don't want you to think female, male. What I'm talking about is active and directed, which would be kind of like masculine, versus passive, which is that of surrender and receiving. So both of them, though, keep in mind, are contained within Aries. So what we have here is sun energy still being prominent. Aries is exalted in terms of the sun. So what you want to look for here is the understanding that even though I say passive, this is electric. There's a lot of energy in this. So how that can translate is impulsive, in need of guidance ultimately. So let's go ahead and look at the gunas first. So we have tamasic, rajasic, rajasic. So we have rajasic energy in its base. So again, the first third of the entire zodiac, or the first third of all these nakshatras, are all rajasic on the base, as their base, meaning active component. They're moving out into life, attaching to life, and sort of moving towards manifestation. Then it's rajasic on its secondary level, and that means positive mind, so proactive. Then finally tamasic. This is where it differs from Ashwini, the previous nakshatra, which was rajasic. So with Ashwini, we talked about potential. We talked about, the word was latency. So a lot of latent and potential energy, and it was this concept of this early spring energy that's ready to be birthed, but it's not there yet because it was latency and potential. So now with Bharani, this energy is moving from potential to kinetic, or energy in motion. So now what I mean by that is energy in the motion towards becoming concrete, towards the manifest. And how we can see that is this tamasic outpouring. So these folks move out into life tamasically, which could have a number of meanings. I tend to see with tamasic energy, you tend to see a lot of past associations, the ability to get stuck in one's past. And that's a pretty prominent feature with this particular sign. It also could be negative, meaning that they could be defensive, etc., etc. But we're going to focus predominantly on the sort of, I guess, the passive principle, or which is also kind of tamasic in a way. Because what tamasic, I guess, generically implies is inertia. So, and again, it doesn't mean these people don't move and don't do anything. It just means that their focus is on sort of, I guess, attracting or bringing in life force, channeling it out into the material. So it's a wonderful conduit, which is also the symbol of this particular nakshatra, which is the yoni, or the female reproductive organ, which is an interesting kind of way to think about the yoni, is that it's a way of bringing kind of like almost like a unmanifest soul out into the world as a human being. So, and this is a lot of the energy with Bharani. So also what we have here is, let's see, we got the god Yama. So Yama is also incredibly interesting too to look at. I remember I was looking at this and I'm like, this is early in the zodiac. Why are we having this symbol of death? And well, the reason is because death just simply implies a new birth. And so essentially what ends up happening is, again, there's a past fixation with these folks. So the need to move on from one's path, nostalgia. So what happens with nostalgia or past fixation, well, it can either benefit you or it can traumatize you. So let's say some past trauma happens, and let's say you're stuck in victimhood. You can't escape it. Like you keep replaying the pattern over and over and over again, whatever the trauma is. The pattern of victimhood inherently saps a life force and destroys life force. So what we end up needing to do is evolving past that. However, that's not always easy without help. So the other way the past functions is we learn from the past, so the past can transform us. And once it transforms us, once again, this idea of a birth canal or sort of death into rebirth, which is this hindrance that sits in our nervous system, sits in our etheric mind as, you know, something we end up fixating on. But when we realize we finally gain space from it, what ends up happening is that we gain objectivity through meditation, through yoga, etc. We gain objectivity of that past experience, and we can grow and learn from it. And so it transforms, once again, this movement through a birth canal into something new. So I want to elaborate a little bit on this Yama concept. So we already kind of talked about the idea of the death component. So Yama also means something else. Like yogically, it's sort of like practices and disciplines, reflections, etc., which are done on a repetitive basis that ultimately do something similar to what Yama, the god of death, does, which is transform. What do I mean by that? So the practice of any exercise, a yogic exercise, typically it's recommended you do it for 40 days. Now, why do you do it for 40 days? Well, you can do it once and you may have an experience. You may have an experience, but that experience is a hook. It's to draw you in so that you keep doing it over and over and over again. So that's something to keep in mind for those mystical seekers out there, is that just because you have an experience once doesn't mean it's going to repeat. In fact, that experience was simply a lure to get you to continue to do something. But what you end up doing is, as you repeat this practice over and over and over and over again, what ends up happening is that energy, which was once stagnant, which was once inert, again, tamasic, ends up transforming into a new pattern or new growth. So again, that's a big feature with Bharani, is this pattern of converting the old into the new, converting the subjective into the objective. And what do I mean by subjective into objective? What I mean by subjective is when we are identified, and subjectivity was very big with Ashwini, the previous nakshatra, but in this particular case, subjective is we get caught up in our feelings and our emotions, and it has a way of creating an inertia as we become identified with it. Now, objectivity comes along through meditation and yoga, etc., then all of a sudden we have space from it. So this sign, once again, is the conversion from subjective to objective. Something else that yogic practices do is it's a process of purification. Again, I kind of talked about what happens, this sort of like taking on a new pattern after practicing something for 40 days. The purification process is essential to pretty much every spiritual path. And, well, what essentially we're purifying, once again, is the past. And why the past? You know, the thing is that think about it. Most of our personality is basically the past. The moment you have a thought of something, it's the past. The moment you have an experience of something, it's the past. Simply the relay time it takes for something to move through the nervous system makes it the past. So essentially our egos or our personalities are a collection of the past. So this purification process, which happens through meditation and sort of different spiritual paths, essentially what we're doing is that we're purifying the past. We're gaining objectivity from the past. And how do we do this? By the recognition of what our true nature is, which is presence itself. It's consciousness itself. Once we can see that presence and that we are indeed presence, and I don't mean this in the sense of like egoically we're supposed to realize that. This is cryptic, but in meditation, if you're perceiving it, if you're looking at it, it's not who you are. It's an object. So if you're feeling it, it's not who you are. It's an object. All these things can be identified with a personality and with the ego. So in the truest sense, in the meditative sense, your true nature is consciousness itself, and you can't look at it. So I want to talk about the feminine a little bit more too, again, because I brought up the Shakti concept earlier. So the feminine, the passive principle, that of surrender, is inherently attractive. Think about a male and a female. I'm a dude, so I can speak for this. Men are like really drawn to women, straight guys, that is. It's unbelievably magnetic. You know, we get carried away. So much of what men do is really about women. So many of the things that we enjoy and want to cultivate in life are really about women. So much of our work is about women. And so essentially what I'm saying is that whether men are feathering the nest for women or you know, through work and sort of achieving financial success, whatever it is, ultimately we're waiting for that opportunity to sort of pass on our genetics. And again, not everyone wants to be a father, but that's the fundamental thing going on here. So we get drawn to women as that sort of, the women are that conduit, which we can then sort of pass on our genetics, and then they sort of convert it within their being into this new expression of a human being. So this passive principle, in terms of Bharani, again, I'll sort of rule out the sex play here. Men, or not men rather, but Bharani is this attractive force. And it's, once again, this idea of passivity. And what we're looking at here is intuition, remembering that this sign is ruled by Venus. Venus is sensual, sensitive, intuitive. So where does intuition rise from? It doesn't rise from logic. It doesn't rise from thought. It simply rises. It's something that's felt and experienced. And very much the same can be said of inspiration. So the creative inspiration for which Bharani is known for isn't that which is forced. It is that which spontaneously rises. But in order for it to rise, once again, these folks keep bringing up the past. Once again, they need to be able to be objective from the past, because their truest positive expression here is yogic in nature. And they can take that into excess. And this is a big sign of excess. So not only can they just like literally beat to death a yogic technique. Anyway, I was about to talk about my ex-wife. I won't go there. So you can about beat the death a yogic technique to the point where they breaks them down. And again, this idea of breaking something down in order to rebuild. So again, this process that we keep talking about, death and rebirth, breaking things down and rebuilding, you're getting the theme, I'm sure. So the other area in which they can take this excess is on the negative side, which is over sexual indulgence. This is something that has benefited me from the past, once again talking about my ex-wife. So again, these patterns of excess and this intensity is so incredibly profound, you know. And again, because it's just all this rajasic energy, all this really intense outflow of energy. So this is why this sign in some ways is very confusing, because we're using all these terms like passive and surrender, which implies that they're not doing anything. But that simply implies what it's simply, I guess, what those terms are really showing is not that they are doing nothing, but how inspiration rises. And again, it rises out of the darkness. Shakti is this darkness principle. I can think about any woman I've ever been attracted to. This always happens to me. Every woman I'm drawn to, there's always the same pattern, which is I feel a kind of a fear. And it's not a fear of commitment or a self-esteem thing or whatever it is. It's the unknown. Any new relationship, there is an unknown. There's unknowns about the person's personality, et cetera, et cetera. But as a man, I'm just like, go for it. So there's nothing but driven. And I'm not saying women don't experience this fear as well. But the way that men get sucked into women, there's a bit of, well, I guess this is how men learn to surrender in some ways. We have to surrender to that sort of unknown principle. Even though we can sometimes be entirely driven by this lust, if we can create some separation from that lust and we're driven towards the feminine, it's actually, you know, like I said, what we end up actually experiencing is that sort of fear. In that fear, well, there's some richness there. There's depth, there's darkness. But ultimately, again, it's something that as a man, you know, I just can't help. So embrace the fear openly. And one other thing I kind of want to talk about this with this particular nakshatra, let's talk about like characteristics. So I kind of talked about, again, all the sort of extremes that go along with this. So the other thing is, I kind of got the sense that these folks are kind of judgmental. I don't mean judgment. Well, I do mean judgmental in kind of a bad way. But I kind of think about it as discerning in some way. So again, looking at tamasic energy. So tamasic energy is negative. Well, negative. It's fast. You know, think about like things that come up to protect you. So tamasic is protection. It's the fastest aspect of the mind. The negative mind is incredibly fast. So what I'm getting at here is that if some person, idea, or whatever it is does not fit these people's highest aspiration, their highest ideals, they don't really want much to do with it. They could push it away. So that's something else you have to look for if you're a native of this particular place. That all this sensitivity with this particular nakshatra grants these individuals, which is, so they become very, very fine-tuned to those situations which are helpful to them. And they respond well to it. So show these individuals kindness, helpfulness, and they will open up. Again, if you are not reflecting those attributes, they'll push you away. So with all that, let me go ahead and show you into the next segment how I connected Bharani Nakshatra to Projection 13, the Gourmet. All right, so here we have Yogi Bhajan's book, The Mind. And at the back of this book, we have the chart. Now, this is how I made the connection between Bharani Nakshatra and Projection 13. So, keeping in mind that Bharani Nakshatra is Rajasic on its basic level. So, or its impersonal mind, meaning, as it says here, is active, transforming, firing, changing, and fast. And then on its secondary level, it is the positive mind, which is, once again, constructive, action-oriented, proactive, risk-taking, la la la. And then finally, on its tertiary level, is negative, which is creating art through past memory. Projection 13, the Gourmet. So what we do now, just real quickly, what this chart is actually showing, it's showing how the elements precipitate out, basically becoming more dense. So on the level of the projections, we're kind of like at the level of water. So which is more dense than fire, less dense, or more dense than earth, ether, etc. So go ahead and we're going to flip through the book. We'll find projection 13. Here we are, projection 13, the Gourmet, creating art through past memory, a long explanation, and the practice. So this particular practice says to do it for 11 minutes. And in the next segment, I will go ahead and show you how to do this exercise. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do projection 13 or Gourmet. So yeah, this exercise, you know, it's funny because what I do with this book often is that I have a practice, and I like the universe to choose for me. So Bharani is a big energy in my particular chart. It's my south node, whatever. Essentially what it does though is it kind of lends a sort of intuitive, well, I like intuition a lot. It draws things that sort of rise up spontaneously, ways in which I'm led through faith, etc., etc. These things are really important for me. And one of the things I do with this particular book is I flip with my eyes closed through the practices in the back of the book until, like, as I'm flipping, I'm like, oh, I can't even keep flipping anymore. It's just like my hands will stop, and I just know that's the exercise I need to try. And then usually I'll use my left hand, and I wave my left hand over, because there's two practices, one on each page. I'll run my hand over either or, and one will inevitably feel stronger than the other. Now, why do I use my left hand? The left hand is the receiving hand. It's the hand that, generally speaking, like if let's say you meditate with crystals, in all likelihood, you're going to feel more with your left hand than you will your right. Now, how this is kind of interesting is that this particular exercise has you holding your left hand out in front of the heart 4 to 6 inches. Now, what I would ask you to do is not to do this mechanically, but to do this through feeling. Meaning, again, 4 to 6 inches out from the heart. What you want to do is you want to, anywhere from the clavicle region down to your sternum, you want to just move the hand, and you're going to feel a prominent position, a position which feels strong to you. Like I have a lot of energy coming off at this point where I have my hand right now. It feels really like, whoa, pushy. So I know that's where I'm going to put my hand. So another reason I told you about that story of like flipping through this book and letting my intuition kind of guide me which exercise to use is to do with the fact that I must have fallen on this particular exercise more than any of the other exercises in this book, which kind of makes sense if you understand the South Node, the Mood, and Ketu, which is, Bharani is my placement, being about karma in the past. So, and I'll go into that in another video. But so this particular exercise, like I said, the first thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and find that space in front of the heart. With your right hand, you're going to keep the elbow straight, and you're going to go into Gyan Mudra. So that is index finger and thumb touching. And that is basically the positioning and the posture. So the eyes, you want to bring to the tip of the nose. Now, how I typically do this is, first off, you exhale all the air out, and then you move your eyes up and to the left. Not your head, just your eyes. And then you inhale a deep breath. And then you want to retain the breath, and you want to rotate your eyes up and to the right. Again, retaining the breath. Then you want to rotate the eyes directly up, retaining the breath. And then you want to bring then you want to exhale all the air out, retain the breath out, roll the eyes down to the tip of the nose. And that'll be your focal point, is at the tip of the nose. So now the mantra associated with this is, so it's Sat Narayan. And Narayan is N-A-R-A-Y-A-N. So it's Sat Narayan, Wahe Guru, Hari, that's H-A-R-E-E, Narayan Satnam. So it's Sat Narayan, Wahe Guru, Hari Narayan Satnam. Sat Narayan, Wahe Guru, Hari Narayan Satnam. What the mantra means is true sustainer, indescribable wisdom, creative sustainer, true identity. So, in other words, that word Narayan means sustainer. So, I think that's pretty much all the details of this particular one. So let me go ahead and show you what it all looks like together. So once again, left hand at the heart center, 4 to 6 inches out in front. Eyes are at the tip of the nose. Right hand, straight elbow, Gyan Mudra. Spine, hold up tall. You want to push those hip bones down into the floor. Push the perineum down into the floor, which will help you pick up the lower portion of the body, of the trunk, down below the ribs. Then you want to do a light neck lock, which will help pick up the chest. And that's your positioning and posture. So what do you want to do with this particular mantra is I generally, there's no breath pattern prescribed to it, meaning it doesn't say you have to do it all in one breath or anything like that. However, you know, yeah, I mean, keep it at that. Just let the breath happen naturally. Let the mantra just simply be repetitive. So I'll go ahead and show you what this looks like. Sat Narayan Wahe Guru, Hari Narayan Satnam. Sat Narayan Wahe Guru, Hari Narayan Satnam. Sat Narayan Wahe Guru, Hari Narayan Satnam. And so to finish this exercise, you inhale, retain the breath. You want to retain the breath for, think about 10 to 20 seconds. Exhale, relax the hands. And then it says, meditate with open awareness. What I suggest doing before you meditate with open awareness is to smile inwardly. Again, we're working with that heart energy here. So essentially what we're trying to do is we're kind of reformulating our emotions. We're sort of shifting our emotions from baser, heavier tendencies, again, because Bharani has that tamasic charge. And what we're doing is we're raising it up to the level of the heart, to the level of presence. So one other thing, while I was doing that mantra for you guys, what I kept noticing is, so there's 2 words which imply a pulling into the navel point. So Sat, pulling in the navel point, which again is about 2 fingers below the actual navel, or it's approximately the belt line. And so it's Sat Narayan Wahe Guru. So notice how the sound should be rising up and out. And then it's Hari. So anytime you see Har or Sat, usually it implies pulling in the belt line. So Hari Narayan Satnam. You kind of get the theme, I think. So with all that said, and again, after you do all this, the inner smile, the whole bit, meditate with open awareness. Give it at least 5 minutes. So with all that said, I appreciate you watching this video. Thank you much.